What's up, everybody? We're back here. EJ Stewart, Kendall Stewart. We are live talking the 2023 NBA draft. Kendall, really exciting to do this. We did this last year. We're less than an hour away from the NBA draft. So I know there are plenty of people really excited, wanting to talk about these players. There's a lot of movement happening in this draft as well. Not necessarily in the draft, but some of these trades that we've been seeing over the past 24 hours. So we'll get into all that. But Kendall, it is draft night, one of our favorite nights of the year. How are you feeling?
I'm fired up, man. It's been an interesting draft cycle because it feels like, not since going back to the LeBron draft and, Zion to a degree, has it felt like we've seen a draft that's been so dominated by the conversation at number one and not like it's been a debate or anything. It's just so much infatuation with the guys going number one that I feel like, there have been some talk about 2 and 3. That's kind of where the draft starts. But past that, I feel like there's been, it's been very quiet, and I'm sure Rockets fans have a feeling where they're going. I'm sure Pistons fans have, preferences. But, I feel like if you're not really dialed in on what those teams are doing, the draft really starts at 4 where it could just go in a million different directions. And, those are the things that I'm interested in as we get closer. But like you said, man, I mean, it's been a wild week already with trades. I expect more to be going on today.
Yep.
Then that's always great, man. Like, it's what separates the NBA draft and the NFL draft. Is that while the NFL draft is great with trades, it's mostly pick for pick trades, but in the NBA.
Every now and then you'll have an AJ Brown who gets involved in the trade, but like a lot of times you're right. It's a lot of times it's it's already guys who guys who are in the draft. Teams moving up, teams moving down, and we'll get plenty of that tonight as well, I assume. But draft night. What's exciting about NBA draft night is it starts off the beginning of the offseason, really.
Yeah,
and you saw that with 2 trades. And I want to get to some of those trades in a bit, but I first want to talk about some of the storylines we have coming into tonight regarding these picks. So, number 1, very clear, Victor Wembanyama will be taking number 1. What is happening at number 2 with Charlotte is becoming very interesting. So, earlier in the week, I think as of really yesterday, the word was that Brandon Miller had impressed Michael Jordan, impressed ownership in his second workout, and that they were excited to take him at number 2. So I thought it was all wrapped up and done there. Then all of a sudden you got the report from Shams today saying that actually it's Scoot Henderson, the G League Ignite guard, that is gaining momentum for going number 2 now in this draft. What exactly do you think is going on with Charlotte at number 2?
It's so funny because Woj was on a podcast earlier this week. He was on the Ryan Russillo podcast on The Ringer. He said he was not going to be giving away picks this year. Yeah, he's not. He's not
really
going to be live streaming picks. He's going to be more focused on the.
Thank goodness, man. Because that's I love. Shout out to Woj, but that's trash. By the way, I hate the spoiling of picks.
Now, I don't.
Yeah, I bet Shams.
Yeah, Shams is going to be doing it anyway.
Yeah, Shams will be doing it, but Woj having some dignity finally.
Yeah, because Woj is on the broadcast. So it's like you can't even avoid it at that point in the years past. But he sort of went away from that, with these top 3 picks where he was like, the Charlotte Hornets are zeroing in on Brandon Miller, like he said a couple days ago. But then Shams has countered with the Scoot report, like you mentioned earlier today. The only thing that's changed in that time period is Brandon Miller said, Paul George is my GOAT instead of Michael Jordan. So,
is that what got Michael Jordan to maybe think, with the Scoot Henderson kid, he got something special. I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, exactly. It's the embodiment, the draft embodiment of and I took that personally. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a fantastic debate. I mean, as much as what we think's going to do, I mean, I will just, put it on the record. I would take Scoot Henderson with this pick.
I would as well.
About it a little bit in one of our previous videos, but it's a tough choice because I love both prospects. They're both, talented players, but I just feel like in the culture, Scoot fits better. And honestly, I'd pick Scoot both for Charlotte and for Portland for different reasons. I think I'd take Scoot in both situations. And there may be a couple situations around the league where I would take a guy like Brandon Miller, but most times, 8-9 times out of 10, I'm taking Scoot, and I'm just living with the results. I think he has a high floor. You know what you're getting for the most part with this guy, and yeah, no, but that's like you said, that's where the draft starts, where the intrigue will arise. It doesn't sound like there's going to be too many trades at that point. But how are you feeling about the number 2 pick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that look, I think someone tweeted it, and I kind of agree. I don't think there is. Well, I think there probably was dissension at some point. I don't think that you're seeing a late minute audible. I think that there is conversations being had because of the interest in both of these players, in Scoot and in Brandon Miller, particularly what may happen at 3 with the Blazers, who that's a mystery in itself. What's crazy to me is I originally thought that the mystery was going to be only at 3, but now apparently they're kind of creating a mystery at 2. But like that whole thing is still a situation with what are they doing with Dame Lillard? Are they gonna draft another young player? Dame Lillard is given this weird, I don't even want to call it ultimatum. He's just like, I'm just gonna see what they do, and that's gonna determine how I feel. Which, okay, whatever that means. So we thought the intrigue was only there, but here now we have it too. With Charlotte now, I think they're trying to throw some smoke screens. I think they want to see if one of these teams may want to jump up and say, hey, you know what, we'll go and grab Scoot, or we'll go and grab Brandon Miller if you're not that interested.
Like we saw happen, you know, with in the NFL draft with the Houston Texans saying, look, we gotta go and try and get Will Anderson. You know, we're gonna take Stroud and trade back up to get Will Anderson. Like, you feel like if you're in that spot, you know, you have to move up to get that guy, even if, you know, or we saw years ago with Mitch Trubisky where the Bears moved up one spot from 3 to 2 to make sure they got their quarterback. So it's something that can happen. There's been some buzz at number 3. You mentioned the mystery around the Blazers. I don't know if it's related to Brandon Miller being available at 3 and there being a shakeup, or Scoot Henderson, but it sounds like there is some buzz around the name Amen Thompson circling that Portland pick. It's weird, you know, whether or not I agree with it is one thing, but again, the idea that he's on the board and he's a strong possibility has not really been talked about for the most part. A lot of the focus has been on, you know, what is going to happen. You know, are they going to end up with Scoot, or are they going to Brandon Miller? So to now put it out there that you could have a guy in Amen Thompson who could wind up there means that now if you're the Rockets, who I think a lot of people felt were going to end up with Amen Thompson, there may be a scenario where one of those 2 guys that we've been talking about at number 2 is going to be there at 4.
Yeah, and shout out to, by the way, everybody checking us out on YouTube. I believe you're also on Twitter as well, on EJ_Stewart is where you can follow me on Twitter, talking NBA draft. Yeah, the Amen Thompson thing, always, I feel like it was weird because I feel like we got into this game of Scoot or Brandon Miller, and that number 3 pick was interesting to me because if Portland was going to keep that pick, and somehow want to keep Dame around. Like, if there was going to be a scenario, I think a lot of people didn't see that as a possibility. The possibility that they could try to keep Dame and draft a player that's not Scoot away. Like, it just seemed like nobody thought about that. But if that was going to happen, it seemed to me like getting a bigger guy who's not another 6'2" guard would make more sense if that's the lane you were going to go. Is it believable that Dame Lillard's going to want to play with a kid like Amen Thompson? Not really. And I would not be in a scenario where if I could lose Dame Lillard and I'd miss out on Scoot Henderson, I think that would be a massive mistake. But that could be the lane where Portland is playing in, where they're going to say, hey, maybe we can get a taller, multi-positional player who can play on the ball, play off the ball, give us some more athleticism, more size. And we've seen the Blazers try to transition themselves into more of an athletic team. That would make a lot of sense. I think that in many ways, if that becomes the scenario, there's a chance that they go with Amen Thompson because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's enticing, the concept of having those 2 guys, you know, run, you know, or having Thompson and a guy like Shaedon Sharpe, you know, on the wings, with the athletic profile that you'd have. Your last 2 picks being 2 of the most athletic players to come in the league in the last 5 years is intriguing. I think it's a reach, not because like this draft, not because there's a bunch of guys better than Amen Thompson at that spot, but you know, I just feel like you're taking number 3 and you're a team that you're trying to compete. I just don't know if he's a guy that's going to come in. I don't know if there are many guys in this draft at that spot. Scoot, if he's available, I think is one of those guys that could come in right away and help a good team immediately. But again, it's enticing because of the long-term potential that he has as a pairing with. Similar to a lot of people talking about the fit with Jalen Green and the fit with the rest of that group in Houston. I think it's sort of similar in Portland. We talk about the young pieces there.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, man. Like, it's all about the whole Dame situation. It's what happens with that. Like, are you really seriously considering keeping him around? If that's the case, I mean, I don't know what Scoot Henderson does for you if you're going to also have Anthony Simons in the mix. But at the same time, it's a situation where I think, to me, and I think we both agree, there is a big gap, I think, between the top 3 guys and the next guys. I mean, me and you both have Scoot at number 2 in our big board. So now if you're going from the second best player in our eyes to wherever you have him in Thompson, I would probably have him somewhere at 4 or 5. I think I have him officially at 4. But like, if he's 5th or 6th on your board, then it's like that becomes a big risk you're taking where you're drafting for need at that high a draft pick for a team that's so bad. That becomes a kind of a dangerous game that the Blazers could be playing. What do you think will happen at 2? Do you think that the Hornets end up taking Brandon Miller? Is it smoke screen? Do you think that Scoot is the decision? And if it is Scoot, like, what do you think they're thinking over there?
Shoot, you get this late in the game. We saw last year, I was banging the table. It's got to be Paolo, but the word was Jabari Smith, and then last minute the Magic Paolo. So like, in this game, anything can happen once you get to this point. Like I said, smoke screens exist, but I don't know. I mean, the fit with him and Ball isn't ideal, but I think it harkens back to the De'Aaron Fox Tyrese Halliburton combo where you say to yourself, if having 2 great point guards, it's not like football where you say to yourself, I've got 2 point guards, I've got none. That's not how it is in basketball. If you have 2 great point guards, it's not ideal, in terms of team building. You'd rather have a great point guard and a great, big, or something like that. But having 2 great point guards is better than having 1 great point guard and then another guy who's just a guy. So, if you view Scoot as that kind of elite point guard prospect which I don't know if he's like in that upper like Dame, or I'd even go beyond that, like Derrick Rose, Kyrie, guys who were number 1 picks and were dominant from day one. If he's not that, he may be in that next tier of, when Dame came into the league and what we saw from some of these more recent guys, that have come in, maybe not been dominant from day one, but have obviously evolved into really good player. Trae Young, Darius Garland, if he's that mold of player, then I just feel like you have to take him. And to me, I think that's where they go, and you figure it out from there. Because it's not like they're a team that is like that great anyway. You're not a team where you're saying to yourself, man, we're 1 piece away.
Yeah. Maybe you had a bad season, but if you have, you get 1 good player, all of a sudden you find something.
Yeah, exactly.
Similar to like how LaMelo got when LaMelo went to Charlotte. Like, Charlotte kind of turned it around really quickly, and we're a playing team.
Yeah, Portland is in that feeling where this guy that we get could be playing in the playoffs or could be playing.
Yeah, and it might be unrealistic, but because you have Dame Lillard, you have the reason to maybe think that. Charlotte has no reason to believe that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Like Charlotte, at this point, you just figure it out because your team might lose 50 games regardless.
Right. Yeah, and to me, you know what? Like, first of all, like the NBA, I hate using this term because it's such a cliche, but the NBA has become so positionless, and LaMelo Ball is so tall. Like, to me, I would at first try to play those guys out. And we talked about this a little bit on one of our videos we did. I forgot which one it was. Forgive me, but might have been Fact or Fiction, where look, the Kings did this with Fox and Halliburton, and they kept one of those, and then if they got the guy who's the best guy available. The guy came out, balled out. They weren't necessarily the greatest fit, but people saw Halliburton's talent, and then they traded him for an all-star. And who's to say that Charlotte can't do that here? And it doesn't have to mean that you're trading Scoot Henderson. Maybe you're trading LaMelo Ball. It doesn't matter. My thing is, I don't think that I would be so scared because of LaMelo Ball's physical frame of taking a small guard, especially someone as athletic and fast as Scoot Henderson. You would think that him playing with Ball, just like everybody's excited about what Brandon Miller could do, I think Scoot Henderson also could be dynamic playing in that kind of up-tempo style that Charles is going to want to try to play. So interesting stuff there. I want to see, and then I'll see. I've not tested this out. Hopefully this works, but I want to try to share my screen here. I want to talk about the rest of this. And there you go. The rest of this. What's the name? This order for the draft. Yes. So you got there. We talked about San Antonio, Charlotte, and shout out to Tankathon, as you see there. The thing I'm going with here. Charlotte, San Antonio, Portland, top 3. We talked about those teams. Now you got 4 Houston, 5 Detroit, 6 Orlando. Orlando has 2 lottery picks. They're at 6 and they're at 11. Where do you think the draft goes from there? Are there players who you see maybe going higher than maybe people would expect in that situation? You have players going lower maybe in that lottery, because this is something we talked about in our fact or fiction video as well. There's a lot of there's not much of a difference between the top 2 guys, top 3 guys, the 4 to 14 or whatever. So where are some fits you think make sense with where the rest of the draft lies there?
I was gonna ask you an interesting question we haven't asked yet in this draft is who are in your mind, because there's been talk about you see Utah there at 9 and Oklahoma City. We know those teams are both teams with a ton of draft capital. There's been talk about Indiana at 7 being teams. Washington now has gained some draft capital. Teams that are maybe looking at trading up the top 5, potentially trading with Houston or trading with Detroit or trading with Orlando to try and get into the top 5 or 6. Is there a player in this draft outside of that top 3? Maybe even take out Amen Thompson. But if there's a player, even if you're including him, that you think is worth trading up for? Or if you were a team like
Utah, it depends on where you're trading up, and it depends on the team. I mean, I'm trying to envision who, because I agree. I think that there are teams in this lottery or teams near the lottery that want to get that.
The Pelicans, trying to trade up from 14 to get to 2 to get Scoot. There's been less talk about that in the last couple of days, but if they can't do that, is there a team like them or Toronto we've heard about trying to trade?
The players I would be looking at for a potential trade up situation would be Cam Whitmore from Villanova. I could see a team being enamored with his.
There's been some smoke about him sliding recently. I don't know if that's real or not.
Right, and I kind of, and I'm not. I like him. I'm not in love with him, especially maybe some of these other people are. Or maybe I'm more in line with the NBA than I thought. Originally, he was a guy that was being talked about for potentially 4. I thought that was a little high for him. But if a team hears he's sliding, maybe they say, well, let's get aggressive and let's get the guy we want. Maybe if it's a team like New Orleans, a great example, who's at 14, they hear, oh, hey, he's sliding. They know he won't get past 8 at Washington or 7 at Indiana. They say, well, let's get ahead of those teams so we can go and get this guy. If Orlando's not enamored or Detroit's not enamored, maybe that's a team that would make sense to say, hey, let's go up. Like, I think Detroit at 5 is absolutely, to me, a trade-up option. I mean, how many more, high-end top lottery picks are they going to have?
Yeah, Monty Williams, he's got enough toys to play with now, so to speak.
Yeah, at a certain point, you got to start developing these guys that you have.
Yeah,
so,
same with Orlando.
Yeah, so I wonder if they're an option to trade up. Orlando, there's no way I think Orlando is taking those 2 lottery picks, in my opinion. I mean, if they do, they do. But I saw some stuff today that Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony could very well be on the trade block right now, which is not that surprising. Suggs has been injured and not all that efficient.
In
his early season or career. Yeah.
But if I'm the Celtics, I'm circling the wagon on Jalen Suggs and saying,
I know you like him. Yeah, I know you like him. I could also see, Whitmore. I could see a Jarius Walker, someone maybe saying, hey, that's especially those teams that are better. Again, we keep talking about New Orleans, Oklahoma City. Could they say, hey, we add that piece to the team that we have, bam, we're in the playoffs next year. I can see maybe those 2 guys being options there. Are there any guys you would see as trade-up options from 4 to 14?
The guys that I think it'll happen for, I think you're right. I think one of the Thompsons, I could see a team being enamored with the explosiveness and the athleticism and the upside. Um,
Before you
this is
continue, before you continue, what? 'Cause I know. Shout out to the people who've been following our content for years. I know we didn't do as much this year, as we normally do. But like, where are you at on the Thompson twins? Like, are you high on them? To me, like they're still a big mystery. To me, they're kind of like a mold of clay, and in some ways that's positive because like you can mold them into whatever you want. I think, which because they're so athletic, they do have really good ball skills. You can't teach their length, so there's some things you're like, look, I mean, you get this guy. Both of those kids are special physical specimens. But like, evaluating what you saw in Overtime Elite, in my opinion, I found very difficult during this process. So where are you exactly on like what the Thompson twins are coming into their NBA first year rookie seasons?
Yeah, I mean the Overtime Elite thing was so chaotic. Like the film and the whole aesthetic is like I felt like I was watching like an EDM concert at the same time as I was watching a basketball game. It was, it was just a weird aesthetic. But no, yeah. In terms of them as players, I'm down on them. Just because I don't think that they're going to be high impact guys right away. I think that they are guys that will be developmental guys, and sometimes that those things overlap when you're talking about some of these bad teams in the league that they'll probably wind up on. So I don't think that that's necessarily the worst thing in the world, but they feel like guys like a guy like Amen Thompson would fit right in with the Rockets team we've seen play the last.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if he's going to fit in Ime Udoka's version of the Rockets, but he's going to fit in with the team that we saw, and he'll play, and he probably put up some decent numbers, but I don't think he's impacting winning at a high level right now. And the thing about it is you figure it out in a couple of years. Like, I think that they're comparable to like Jonathan Kuminga in terms of the kind of production you're going to get. Amen obviously a lot better, passer and better handle.
Amen could play point guard. Yeah, and exactly. Some people will try to develop him like that. Would.
And but I think if you're, that's the archetype, in terms of a physical profile that you're thinking about. And these guys I think might be even a touch more explosive than Kuminga, but I just still feel like, it's just so tough because the competition. These guys are older. These guys are both 20 years old playing playing with 16-year-olds in some cases, right. 7-year-olds. Like, so it's just so hard to evaluate the level of competition. Who are we playing against? The coaching is pretty high level, but just the environment's so tough that I question them, coming in right away. But in terms of like the guys that I think, the other guys that the guy who I think is a sneaky trade up option into like the top 5 or 6 is Anthony Black. I think
we talked about that a little bit off air. Yeah, that's a good point.
I could see a team feeling like, man, he's not getting past Washington, for example, and feeling like if that's the guy you really want, I think he's the next best guard outside of Scoot. I like him better than Amen Thompson personally, because I think he's a guy that can play right away. And so I think that if that's the plan, and that's the thing, is you're going to take a guy who has the ability to step in and play a role, whether it be on defense, and maybe this is just me, just being a biased college basketball guy. But again, I think he just got high level coaching. He's played in high level games. I've seen him compete at a high level and be play winning basketball. He's one of the better players they've had in their program at Arkansas, certainly since Musman's been there, and you could argue program history. And I feel like he's only scratched the surface. He played his best basketball at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, you're watching it right now in Maui.
In Maui, and Nick Smith's not on the court.
Yeah.
By the time Nick Smith kind of came back, he still was playing well, but I think that, roles got sort of condensed and kind of got overlapped. But I think you were talking about a guy that has a chance to be an all-star. Very good athlete, as you see, sneaky athlete, even though he doesn't play with that fire and that.
He's bouncy. He's not necessarily explosive, but he's bouncy.
100%. So I like Anthony Black. He's not. He's my next best guard in terms of point guards in this draft.
I agree.
And that excites me. And he feels like the kind of guy that the team would trade up for.
Yeah,
Like
I think
Josh Giddey, they didn't trade up for him, but he went much higher than a lot of people thought he'd go.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts about Anthony Black. I also we didn't talk about was the defensive profile too. The guy is a really active defender. He uses his length well, so a guy who can play both sides of the ball. What you're seeing in this draft, and I feel like it's very odd considering where basketball is going right now. But you're not seeing some great shooting in this draft, especially in the lottery. I think that's one of the things teams were looking at when it comes to Black or the Thompson twins, where you're saying great athletes. The physical profiles are elite, but are you convinced those guys will be able to shoot? I think that's going to be seeing how teams juxtapose that with their draft status. I think will be fascinating. I think they're fortunate they're not necessarily going up against a bunch of lasers in this lottery. Like maybe you could say Grady Dick. I don't know how high Hawkins goes, but he'll probably be near the lottery. And then a Keontae George, who may be the most underrated player in this draft to me. I mean, Keontae George, I watch him play, and he reminds me so much of a guy who got traded just this past week. It reminds me a lot of Bradley Beal. And I think a team that gets him, if you're talking about him, I've seen him falling out of the top 10. That, to me, is an absolute steal. I know he doesn't necessarily play game to game with the same level of intensity, but the kid has an absolute elite bag. And I hate to even talk like that as a elite, as a evaluator, but like I think this is a draft to me where there aren't a lot of great one-on-one scorers, and to me, he's one of the few guys near the top where you give him the ball, he can score on anyone. And I think that some of the evaluation got a little skewed because of the injury he suffered late in the season. And that kind of really screwed up his numbers as well. But Keontae George, a talented scorer out of Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, he's the kind of guy, like you said, his value has sort of been, it's kind of depreciated since when he, came in and he played really well early on. But he's the kind of guy that if I was a team that maybe didn't have a first round pick or had a low first round pick, like, I'm not gonna say like if he's the Chiefs when they got Patrick, I'm be the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, but he's the kind of guy that I feel like I would make that move to get him at 12 or 13 or wherever you can get him, like the Utah Jazz did with Donovan Mitchell. Like that's probably the better NBA comparison, but a playoff team that is trying to find a guy with all-star level potential. I think he's the guy that you target at that range, and I agree with you. I mean, if I was a team and we got to like, I don't know how he fits with some of these teams in the top 5 or 6, but like, he wouldn't go past Indiana to me. In my mind, like that's
let's look at this list again. I mean, you're looking at, you say Indiana at 7
and 10 should all just take him. If he goes past any of the teams, in my opinion, I don't know who else you're taking. Indiana already has a bunch of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Washington at 8. I'm taking him at. I mean, Washington again. I just said how he reminds me so much of Beal.
Yeah, I don't. I love Johnny Davis coming out last year. He didn't show me anything.
As did I.
Yeah, it doesn't show me anything that's gonna make me want to not draft Keontae George. Utah, I mean, they're at a point where like they have a lot of good players, but I feel like they need a guy with real high end upside.
I guess they got. We got to see what's happening. Do you remember what Jordan Clarkson's situation is off the top of your head? I feel like I've seen stuff with him potentially on the move.
I'm not 100% sure on his status, but obviously they have Colin Sexton, who they had re-signed, I believe. When they traded for him. Yep. So that's their guard situation. But those are both solid guys.
And they lost Conley, so that opened up a spot in the backcourt for some minutes 100%. As well.
And Dallas, like, I think he'd be great. Obviously you have Jaden Hardy, who's sort of in a similar mold.
I'll be honest, I kind of don't want to play in Dallas. I kind of feel like if Kyrie returns, and I know, we're not talking about a guy in a 1-year situation. Keontae George's going to have a long NBA career. But Kyrie returns, let's say he does, and you got Luka, You mentioned
That's his
Hardy.
guy, by the way.
They got a lot of guys who kind of like need the ball in their hands, and I think Keontae George, he can spot up and shoot, but I think he's a guy that's a shot creator. So,
Right.
like, I think if he's going to play with Luka, anybody going to play with Luka is not going to get that much shot creation opportunities.
See, but
and
I
then
think
you add Kyrie Irving in there, then you really don't got a lot of shot creation
I feel
opportunities
the opposite for Dallas. Like I've seen a lot of people mock Grady Dick to Dallas because he's a great shooter.
Yeah.
And ideally, he's a guy that'd be great playing with Luka. But like I think they need a guy, and it's part of the reason why they got Kyrie. Obviously, but I think they need a guy. And Kyrie's only going to play 40 games, so obviously you got to bake that in. But
there is that.
Like, yeah. But like Keontae George is a guy that Luka plays with the ball too much. Like he plays too many minutes. He plays too many games. Like you want to have a guy. We know this is a team that when Luka's not out there, especially when Kyrie's not there, also they have absolutely nothing. So like adding a third guy, and I'm not saying he's going to come in and he's part of the big three with those two guys, but like, but long term, if it hits, that's I think where you're viewing his value with those guys. But I think that they look at him and Anthony Black, if he's still available, if he starts to slip, I think that Black wouldn't go past. And both those guys from Texas, I feel like neither one of those guys goes past 10.
What are you looking at the outside of the lottery and the rest of this first round, and how you see it shaking out? Are there some guys you look at and say, hey, this guy someone picks this guy up, this could be a steal? Or are there players you feel are underrated potentially, or maybe some guys that maybe are overrated and shouldn't go in the first round? When you get outside of that lottery, how do you see the rest of this draft playing out?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that there are a lot of interesting names. I like the name that I mentioned in one of our videos talking about risers and sleepers is Chris Murray. Obviously, is a guy that I feel like he's the kind of guy that as he starts to fall, the coaches in the war room start to perk up and say, look, I mean, this is a guy. He's an older player. He's got a proven pedigree with his brother. He's coming from a program with a proven pedigree of putting in guys that can fill it up and play at the NBA level. I think he's a guy that, especially in that range when you're talking about, teams that are playoff teams drafting in that late first round. Look at what Christian Brown did as a veteran college basketball star player and think about, what he did in the playoffs, what he did in the NBA Finals, and say, not saying these guys are similar players, but, those are the kind of guys that you want to take. Keegan Murray was not a late first-round pick, but he ended up playing on a playoff team and a contender virtually, and we saw the impact that he was able to have being an older player. I think Chris Murray is a guy, like, this might sound crazy to people, but I expect him to have just as big, if not a bigger impact than the Thompson twins next year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that, again, it sounds crazy because one guy's going to get picked at 25 and the other's going to be picked at 5, you know. But, like, I just have more, I don't know what to call it, respect, but I just find it I feel more comfortable with his production, his level of production than what I saw from them in overtime.
Yeah, interesting there. This is EJ Stewart and Kendall Stewart watching our NBA draft preview live stream. We're about less than 20 minutes away from the start of the NBA draft. We'll take you right up to the start of the draft, and then we'll be, of course, following like everybody else on Twitter and everything like that. You can follow me, EJ_Stewart, on Twitter. When I think about the rest of this first round, a couple of names come to mind. A guy that has been skyrocketing, a guy that I liked, but now I'm almost concerned about how much other people like him, that maybe we're all kind of falling in love with the wrong guy. Jaime Jaquez is apparently skyrocketing up the boards. This is a guy who got a late invite to the green room tonight, and he's in the green room as we speak with the draft getting ready to get underway. And it's kind of become like an urban legend, like what he's been doing in these workouts. Like, he was a player that wasn't, I won't say not good enough, because clearly he is good, but like he was a player that wasn't sought after enough to where he could avoid the smoke in terms of playing against other competition. So apparently he's been going up against like these late first round, like second round guys and just murdering everybody he sees. And every team that gets him is like, whoa, Jaime Jaquez is not a second round pick. He's a first round pick. And me and you talked about it a little bit off air, but like, I like his game. Now, the one question mark I have is, will the 3-point shot he has translate to the NBA line? I think that's an underrated thing when we talk about players and their jump from the college to the NBA. The NBA line, I know they've moved the college line back several years ago, but it's still a big difference, and you got to make up for that when you're evaluating how guys are going to shoot. And I look at how close are guys shooting at the line, where are the most of the shots coming from. Jaquez shoots a decent 3-point percentage, but he's shooting it right at the line. And if you're talking about a guy who's 6'6", I know he played a lot of 4 and at UCLA. I don't know how much 4 he's playing in the NBA. We're talking about a guy who's a small forward or a shooting guard almost primarily. Can he consistently hit that 3? Maybe a question mark. But the guy is a bucket. I mean, he is so crafty. He can score with both hands. Can score in the mid-range. Can score at the basket. He's tough. He's physical. Scrappy. Like, the guy does it all. So I think if you're a team in that late first round and you're a team that's trying to maybe add a piece that can contribute next year, I think you add Jaime Jaquez. I think that's a great fit. Another guy, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say on Jaquez, like, it's starting to sound like that 17, 18 range with LA and Miami.
The Lakers and Miami are like going to be fighting tooth and nail to grab this kid, which is, again, crazy where we were a couple weeks ago.
You know, the idea that he's a great fit with the Heat culture, whatever that means. But, you know, I mean, he's a very interesting player. I mean, the only concern that I've had with his game is the foot speed and like the quickness on the perimeter. Like you said, he played a lot of 4 in college, and you know, he was quick. He was one of those guys that was too skilled and too quick for guys, you know, at the 4 spot, and too big, too strong, too physical for guys at 2 and 3 in college. In the NBA, if he's playing, he's not going to be big enough in a lot of ways to play the 4 all the time, unless he gets bigger, he bulks up, which he will. He'll get older, but I worry, is he going to have the speed and the quickness to consistently create the 2-3 spot? If he becomes a much better spot up shooter, then I think that makes up for that at the end of the day. But yeah, I love his grit. I love his winning mentality. You know, his clutch gene. I mean, he's got all the intangibles, so to speak, to be a very good NBA player.
Where do you see how the whole point guard thing shakes out? I mean, there are a lot of them. I'm not sure how high people think of some of these kids. I feel like Nick Smith's the guy who I mentioned in the last video we did as a guy who could maybe fall in this draft. And I think you're seeing some of the late mock drafts. Some of them are actually having him fall outside that top, 10, top 15, even the lottery as a whole. Kobe Buffkin from Michigan, I think, is a player that's underrated. I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is underrated. Outside of course, Scoot, how do you see the rest of the point guard shaking out in this one?
Yeah, I mean, Hood-Schifino is a guy that I've been a fan of. We mentioned it before. I mean, I think, he is probably the point guard once you get into that range. Outside of the lottery, that intrigues me the most. I mean, Nick Smith is very interesting. I think Nick Smith, I'd still take a flyer on him for his high school pedigree.
I know you're higher on him than me. I would be scared.
Yeah, I think a lot of people saw the Arkansas stuff and it scared them. And look, I'm not a guy that will just always just hammer like, well, a guy was, Scout.com had them, Scoutathon.com had them ranked, the 12th in the 2028 class when he was 5 years old. Like, obviously what he does in college matters, but I also feel like if you just there's an evaluation, trajectory, there's an evaluation timeline, and like what Nick Smith was in high school and what Nick Smith did in college, like he didn't have a full college basketball experience to really evaluate. So at that point, I'm not saying completely throw it out, but I'm saying you weigh it less, and then you go back to the high school resume, and you're talking about a guy that is an elite shot creator, elite pick and roll maestro. you talk about the range of Jaime Jaquez, Nick Smith had big time range coming into Arkansas. He's not a super athlete. He's kind of more herky jerky than he is
above the rim
elite or above the rim or
yeah
super quick. I think his comp, best case scenario, everything works out, is like a righty D'Angelo Russell. With maybe a little bit more explosiveness, but for the most part, that's the kind of guy you're talking about. And like, that's not a bad player. And maybe that's not a guy who's going in the top 5 anyway. And maybe it's best that he's not going in the top 5. But like I was talking with our dad earlier about Darius Garland, and how when he came out, like we were talking just like if the Knicks would have known that Darius Garland, like if he would have played his whole season at Vanderbilt, like he doesn't go number 5. He probably goes number 3. But he didn't play that season. He was a mystery. We had no idea. We had no idea to go off. And his high school pedigree was big, but it wasn't like top 5 pick.
It was not R.J. Barrett, right?
Yeah, it was not R.J. Barrett. So now at that point, you're just like, well, I can't take him over. This guy's a sure thing. Like, to me, Nick Smith, I would be scared about him being Darius Garland, and maybe to a lesser degree, but I'd be scared about me being like, because he had a different experience when like he was great for 2 games and then shut it down, but he also didn't have a full experience, a full college thing. So that's what would scare me, is that 2 or 3 years from now, when he realized his McDonald American, Nike Hoop Summit, all this, that, and the other potential, that we'd be kicking ourselves saying, man, this is staring us right in the face.
He's going to be an interesting play to follow. I think that you could see him slide. I wouldn't be surprised if someone in the top 10 or in that 10 to 14 range takes him and say, wow, he went ahead of Hood-Schifino, Buffkin. I don't think he'll go ahead of Black, but like he has such a high pedigree coming out that he
goes ahead of Black. Eric Musselman might take his shirt off in the green room. What?
yeah, just out of pure shock. I don't even know if he say excitement, because those are both of his guys, but Eric Musselman loves taking his shirt off. He just takes his shirt off just because of the energy of the room, if somehow that ended up happening. We're about 10 minutes away from the start of the NBA draft. So again, I want to thank everybody for checking out this live stream, watching New Generation Media's 2023 NBA draft preview live stream. We've been talking plenty about the players in this draft. Before we go, I do want to mention some of the trades that happened. So one happening today, you got the Warriors acquiring Chris Paul in a trade with the Wizards. The Wizards that acquired Chris Paul in the trade with the Phoenix Suns that got the Suns Bradley Beal. Jordan Poole and a protected first-round pick goes out to the Washington Wizards. So this was a shocking move for some people. I wasn't as shocked at it as maybe other people were. I mean, there have been word that the Warriors really wanted Chris Paul. I wasn't all that sure why. But here, seeing them actually say, we'll give up value, we'll give up Jordan Poole and a protected first, it's top 20 protected, to get Chris Paul here to ensure that he doesn't go to the Clippers or to the Lakers or somewhere else. What did you think of this move that the Warriors made today?
Well, first of all, I'm happy for the biggest winners of this trade to me are our guys RDC Roll 1, because they have more content that they can put out. Chris Paul on the Warriors, especially if Draymond comes back, is a content machine.
That is true. Even shout Jordan out to RDC World.
Getting traded, yeah, it's a perfect situation for them. But no, I feel like basketball wise, I was surprised. Like, to me, I heard we talked about it, off air, like the Chris Paul Warrior stuff. I didn't believe it. This doesn't make any sense.
I didn't believe it either. But I mean, once it happened, I was like, look, it had to be true. That's why I wasn't that surprised. But yeah,
right, exactly. We had these conversations. I was just, there's no way this is happening. But look, I mean, this is Mike Dunleavy. He's now general manager. He's making his first big move right away. Clearly they picked Draymond over Poole, so to speak. I don't agree with it personally.
I don't love either guy, to be honest. I personally don't.
I know. I am not like.
I would not want to have to make that decision, to be honest.
Yeah,
and maybe that's why Bob Myers left. He didn't want to make that. He didn't have to make that decision. Put that on his record.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not the president of the Jordan Poole fan club by any means, but I am, I don't know. I mean, and maybe they're doing what everybody, what we would do, and probably saying both of them aren't going to be back, and we're just going to retool around the Splash Brothers and figure everything else out. Um, but no, I mean, look, it's going to be fun to watch. I mean, and Chris Paul is a great. I mean, he's still a very good player, especially a guy that you'd like to have in the playoffs and in big moments. And that's a team that's trying to win a championship. So their timeline is probably not that much different than Chris Paul. So, look, he's now at that stage of his career where I'm not saying he's Gary Payton on the Heat, or he's Gary Payton on the Lakers, or Gary Payton on the Celtics, or whatever other crazy teams Gary Payton played on. But he's at that point where he is, he's ring chasing, and he's trying to, compete, to win championships, and this is, probably in his mind the best shot that he's going to have. So, I'm excited for him there, and Washington, and we'll talk about Washington, but it's a teardown, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been one of the more interesting discussions I've seen on NBA Twitter regarding a trade, maybe ever. Like, I think that both sides of PWCs are making great points. It's a non-toxic discussion. I think there are different ways to see it that make sense. My initial thought was, like, look, like, the Warriors clearly just don't believe in Jordan Poole after what they saw in the playoffs. And if you don't believe in him, then the contract is bad. And if you can get out of the contract and get at a guy who's expiring for a team that's going to be up and against that second apron next year, then I can't hate it as much as maybe some people do. Now, it is a rental, essentially. Like, Chris Paul is going to be there for a year, and even if you sign him back, like, who knows what Chris Paul is as an athlete, a year from now, because of just the injuries he's dealt with, and he's going to deal with more injuries next season. But to me, I think this was more about saying, you know what, with Poole, this just ain't it. And when we do tear this thing down, like, we need to actually trade it. Like, we don't have any pieces here that, when Draymond gets too old or Steph gets too old, like, we'll just still be able to compete. Like, I think they realize that Poole is not that guy, so let's get out of it now before, like, the rest of the NBA realizes, and then we can't trade him. It's a risk because Poole did average 20 points last year. Like, he played way better in the regular season. I think people remember. Whenever he started, he was fantastic. But I don't hate that risk because I also don't believe in Jordan Poole like that. So, like, I get it from that standpoint. Chris Paul is still a weird fit to me. Like, I think you say, look, we need to activate these guys in the second unit. We're not going to do that with Jordan Poole. It's going to be just shot hunting. So maybe if we get him, put him next to Moody and Kuminga, maybe we get these guys some looks. If that's what they're trying to do, I could maybe buy it. If I'm hearing they're trying to also trade Kuminga and Moody and get another old guy, then I really don't like this because I don't think the Warriors have this unlimited title window. I think next year is probably the last year that the Warriors legitimately have a chance to win a championship with this squad. So if they're going to get rid of all their young guys for just old dudes, that's going to be a problem. And it's a risk. I think it's a fascinating risk. Mike Dunleavy making a really bold move to start his tenure as Warriors general manager. And finally, your team, Kendall, the Boston Celtics, making a big trade. Kristaps Porzingis headed to Boston. Marcus Smart goes to Memphis. Tyus Jones goes to the Wizards. So the Wizards has been adding all these guards. They got rid of one today finally, but then got one back in Jordan Poole. How do you feel about the Celtics getting KP?
Man, not as good as I felt when they were getting him from Malcolm Brogdon. But still, I mean, he's a good basketball fit there. They needed they needed to add some stuff, obviously. They couldn't stand pat. To me, this was the first, hard move that Brad Stevens had to make since he became general manager or president of basketball operations. He's had to make big moves. He made 2 weeks in, he traded Kemba for Al Horford. That was a big move. It wasn't hard, nobody was like, what are you doing? Like, it was a pretty easy thing to do. Obviously he had the Ime situation, which again, impactful, but it was pretty much out of his hands. He wasn't the face of that, as much as the ownership. But this was the first one where, he had to get rid of the core three, of Brown, Tatum, and Smart. And, obviously Smart was the most expendable, the three being the oldest and the lesser of the three guys. But he's probably, Tatum's obviously a fan favorite, but Smart, has been, the team's biggest fan favorite since he came in the league 10 years ago, and has earned, the trust of a lot of Celtics fans. So it took a lot to make this move. But again, basketball wise, Porzingis adds some size that you're going to need when you're playing against guys like Joel Embiid and your Bam Adebayo in the East, and then obviously we saw what Nikola Jokic did in the West. There's some real big men in the NBA, and then look, for the Grizzlies, you're getting a guy who's going to play in the spirit of Tony Allen. A guy who's Oklahoma State guy, former Celtic, embodies the grit and grind mentality of those Zach Randolph, Tony Allen teams.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We got 2 minutes left, Kendall. So real quickly before we go, give me names you love in this draft that we have not named. It could be first round, second round. Just fire them off real fast.
Names. I'll let you go first.
Okay, Kobe Brown, Missouri. I told you yesterday. Love Kobe Brown. Versatile. Shot the ball extremely well. Big body. I don't maybe trouble who he guards, but I'll figure that out. Really good player. I'm starting to buy my guy Julian Strawther from Gonzaga. He shot the ball so well last season. I'm gonna give him a shout out. Trace Jackson Davis. I think he may be the better version of a guy I liked a couple years ago, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Brandon Podzimski, another guy from the West Coast Conference, a radar shooter, a guy to follow. Ben Shepherd, another guy who can really shoot the ball. Olivier Maxence Prosper can lock up anybody, and he had a great NBA combine, so I want to make sure I shot him out. I think those are some, because I'm going to look out for Amari Bailey too. I think he's being vastly underrated as well. And I'll throw one more guy in there, Cavante Johnson from K-State. The health thing checks out. He's a guy that is a big body guy who I think can withstand the physicality of the NBA.
Look, early in the draft, I like Grady Dick. I think I'm Koulibaly's growing on me. The French guys that aren't Victor have struggled when they got into the league. Like the guys who were drafted in the top 10, I don't know if that's like the Demboyas and the Franks and Kelly Moves, but I think Koulibaly could wind up being good. Derek Whitehead, I'm a fan of. Jet Howard, I'm a fan of.
I like Jet Howard.
In terms of second round guys, Jalen Wilson, big fan of Jalen Wilson's game.
Okay.
I think he's being a good player. Marcus Sasser, as a guy that I think has starting NBA point guard potential. Never really lived up to, I think, the full upside at Houston, but I think has the biggest NBA upside of all those guys there. Sneaky name, Imani Bates. I think Imani Bates is the guy we talked about him off air, EJ. I think he's going to wind up in the right situation, could wind up being a real NBA player. I'm not like one of those guys that's like, I'm based off his Ball's Life mixtape from 2018.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there is some stuff that he showed at EMU, at Memphis, that I'm not totally out on him. And the last two more names. Chris Livingston. I'm naming a lot of guys that were big-time high school guys. That's a lot of the way I evaluate. But Chris Livingston is a guy I'm not totally out on. And then Ricky Council out of Arkansas. I really like his body type, elite athletic profile. I don't think he's a superstar, but I think he's a real NBA player in the right situation.
And one more guy for me, Jordan Walsh, also from Arkansas. A lot of good wing defenders in this draft. He joins that list as well. That's it. That's it. We've been doing a lot of shout outs to Big Suey and our guy, the head coach over there, Muscleman. So hopefully it should be a big night for them. I know Arkansas fans are actually really invested in this draft. So good luck to them. Good luck to everybody. Good luck to all the NBA fans rooting for their teams. I know it's 8 o'clock, so I want to make sure everybody gets to check out the draft. This is our draft preview show. I want to thank Kendall for joining me. Thank you guys again for checking us out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.